Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, anyways, I thought that I would review this little video by this one channel called AKHi TV. And I review his channels, or excuse me, I review his channel and his videos here and there. And a big part of the reason why I review his videos specifically is because AKHi TV, with a lot of his commentary, is usually so biased and usually so out of the realm of realism when it comes down to it that I usually end up reviewing his videos just to kind of give a logical and objective spin on things. Now, whether AKHi TV truly believes in the things that he says, who the hell knows? Do I believe overall that he might possibly believe in the things that he says? I believe that he might, because there are a certain amount of people out there like AKHi TV that believe exactly in what he says. And I think all in all that there are a certain amount of people from the LDBC that like to promote these type of narratives that AKHi TV puts out there. So it is what it is. But whether AKHi TV, whether he's someone overall that just does this overall and does not truly believe it and does this for money, who the hell knows? But either way, the reason why I review these videos when it comes down to it is to kind of help certain people out or to put a logical and objective spin on things when it comes down to it. Because, I just find that just interesting. But Mike Tyson, who of course was a former great heavyweight fighter himself, he talked about this fight. And of course, Mike Tyson, he always had a saying. And basically the saying in boxing was that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And basically what that means is that you can prepare for certain people overall, but a fight is completely different, basically, especially when you go in there and your game plan may not work. And basically that's kind of what it means. And it was ironic coming from Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson, I think, meant it a little bit differently from that because, of course, Mike Tyson, he was known for his extraordinary power. And you can hear from almost anyone that fought him or people that, trained with him. Like there were certain trainers that trained with Evander Holyfield, Lennox Lewis, and Mike Tyson, all those fighters from the 90s. And they said Mike Tyson's power was on a whole nother level compared to any other heavyweight that they trained with. Like they said it was almost inhuman. That's how powerful Mike Tyson was. But it is what it is. Anyways, he's going to be talking about the Deontay Wilder Tyson Fury trilogy. And one thing I also noticed about some of these videos is that these guys, now that Tyson Fury, now that he's actually won the trilogy, and he's pretty much beat Deontay Wilder all 3 times, they're now basically saying that Tyson Fury is not a skilled fighter and that this fight was not based on skill. But you notice all in all that Tyson Fury was a very skilled fighter when they thought Deontay Wilder was going to win the fight. Because a while ago, they thought Deontay Wilder was going to pull out of this trilogy. I thought so once upon a time, too, because I did not think Tyson Fury, I thought that he was going to be a little bit too rusty to win that first fight. I did think that he won that first fight. And the second fight, of course, wasn't even competitive. The third fight had some competitive rounds, but all in all, it wasn't really that competitive either. But we're going to listen to AKHi TV, what he has to say, and let's get into it.
Breaking news of Mike Tyson giving his reaction to Wilder vs. Fury trilogy. Iron Mike Tyson said, quote, "Fury vs. Wilder fight will go down as one of the greatest. Not for skill, but for action and excitement. That fight was all guts, heart, and determination. Everybody won Saturday night. The fight was bigger than the hype. Both of them reached all-time great status. Wilder's coach, Malik..."
That last fight, in my opinion, Fury certainly could have been more skilled than what he put on. And if certain people are going to try to make the point, well, Fury, he's just not that skilled. He just fought a fighter overall that had a right hand. No, Fury is a very skilled fighter. And especially for his size. You're talking about a dude that is 6'9", anywhere from 250 to 280 pounds. He's very fast with his hand speed. He's very fast with his feet. And on top of that, he has an excellent jab. He has an excellent right hand. Really, Tyson Fury, he can throw a multitude of punches. He also can fight in a multitude of ways. And Tyson Fury probably is the greatest heavyweight that I've seen ever since Lennox Lewis.
Scott won the night with great coaching.
And not just talking about in terms of his resume, but also in terms of overall his skills.
When you are an amateur and you have a coach, they nurture you, guide you, and are with you every step of the way. Once you turn pro, you get a trainer. A trainer is in your life as long as the checks are coming. A coach is with you for the rest of your life. A coach feels every punch you take and give to. End of the quote. Them were kind words about Mike Tyson, and I definitely agree.
And Malik Scott would have been with Deontay Wilder. But you know, it's so funny overall because you can tell that a lot of these guys, especially now after this third fight, they don't truly believe that Deontay Wilder got cheated either. But they still kind of have to keep up with that charade, you know. So it is what it is. You know, Deontay Wilder, all we heard, you know, heading into this third fight was Deontay Wilder is a very strong black man, and, you know, people just want to get at him because all in all, you know, all these racists, all sort of bullshit. If Deontay Wilder was such a strong black man, why did he sell out his trainer? Why did he blame his trainer, make that bullshit excuse, basically say overall that, you know, I got drugged and all sort of bullshit, and then he did not even have the intelligence to fire his main trainer, JD's. One would think that if he was going to go with that charade, or that if he was intelligent enough, he also would have fired JD's with the type of bullshit that he was alleging. With all this egg weight in the glove and remove padding and all sort of bullshit. Because JD's would have had to have seen that because he was watching the gloves and watching the hand wraps.
This fight was hands down the fight of the year. Not because of the skill, but because of the heart and the will of both fighters, Wilder and Fury. This was more Gotti Ward than Holyfield Riddick Bowe. On one hand,
well, the third fight, all in all, I'm not necessarily going to call it Gotti Ward because, you know, a lot of people, they're going to take a look at that overall. But really, this fight, I'm trying to think if it reminds me of anything. I don't know. Really what this fight reminds me of overall is, you know, a fighter that probably could have had a better performance. And all in all, you know, they got knocked down a couple times. They got surprised because they did not take the fighter's punches seriously, or they did not take the fighter as seriously as they probably should have. But then they got back up and they beat the shit out of that opponent. Really, actually, what this fight reminds me of is Aegis Kavalauskas versus Terrence Crawford. And no one would call that a Mickey Ward versus, you know, Arturo Gatti fight. You know, Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward, those were some wars. I don't think of the Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury trilogy, I don't think that as a war. It's pretty much a one-sided battle. So it is what it is.
You have Deontay Wilder who went out on his shield.
And don't get me wrong, that's not me trying to discredit Deontay Wilder. He put up the best fight that he could. But other than round 1 and round 4, what rounds were really competitive?
On the other hand, you have Tyson Fury. Every time he got dropped, he got right back up, showing great heart and determination, which made for an epic
I thought you said he got counted out.
Fight, and both fighters deserve all of the respect in the world for that. That being said, Mike Tyson's most popular quote really came into play in this fight, which is, everybody has a game plan till they get hit. That was the moral of the...
Exactly. And, you know, there were so many people that told these guys that, and I said that in my prediction video. I said, Deontay Wilder, he can come out with that bullshit all he wants to about how Tyson Fury has no power. He did not believe it. And you know how he didn't believe it? Because I said immediately, I said, if Deontay Wilder backs up as soon as Tyson Fury goes at him, we're going to know if he truly believes in that narrative or not. And guess what happened right as soon as Tyson Fury went at him? He backed up. You know why he backed up? Because he knew he couldn't walk through Tyson Fury's punches. When people face fighters or boxers that don't have that much of punching power or really have pillow hands like a Paulie Malignaggi, they're not afraid to come forward on them. Even people that don't have a good chin like Amir Khan. Look at Amir Khan versus Paulie Malignaggi, for example, or Ricky Hatton versus Paulie Malignaggi. Those guys walked right through that dude.
Story. When it came to this fight, Deontay Wilder had a great game plan that could have possibly won him the fight. But as soon as he got hit, that game plan went out of the window. Now, don't get me wrong, Wilder didn't...
Once again, I don't think the game plan went out of the window. I mean, I guess you could possibly say that a little bit, but I just think Deontay Wilder, I think that he finally realized that in this third fight that no matter what he tries to do, he's just not going to beat Tyson Fury. He does not have the mental capability. He does not have the physical capability. He does not have the all-around capability to beat Tyson Fury. He can try everything, but he cannot hide the right hand very well when it comes down to it. And even if he tried to, you know, all in all, he showed that he just cannot outbox Tyson Fury.
Fold mentally and quit on winning. He still had the same determination to win. However, as far as following the game plan, that went out of the window. He kissed that game plan goodbye for some odd reason, which goes back to the quote, everyone has a game plan.
Well, like I said, I don't think all in all that Deontay Wilder 100% tried to give up on the game plan. He tried to jab to Tyson Fury's body. He tried to go to the body with the right hand. But once that happened, there was nothing else that Deontay Wilder was going to be able to do. That was the whole entire game plan. The game plan was to jab to Tyson Fury's body, also land a right hand here and there, and then on top of that, just go upstairs with the right hand, and hopefully those body shots will hide the right hand up to the head. But every time Deontay Wilder threw a right hand to the head, it still was very much advertised, because Deontay Wilder, he does not know how to hide the right hand very well against fighters that have elite head movement and elite defense. Now, against Luis Ortiz, he can do that because, all in all, he can hide it a little bit more, because Luis Ortiz, not only is he about 6'4" compared to Deontay Wilder 6'7", but on top of that, when it comes down to it, Luis Ortiz has very, very poor head movement. So that's going to be something overall to where you can, kind of hide that a little bit more. But it is what it is. So, a lot of these people, they take a look at it and say, man, why didn't we see it against, why didn't we see the same jab like Deontay Wilder had in the Bermane Stiverne Luis Ortiz fight? Simple, because overall, Tyson Fury is not either of those fighters. We can take a look at it, and we can take a look at Manny Pacquiao and say, man, he looked so great against someone like a Miguel Cotto. How come overall, he didn't look the same against Floyd Mayweather? Because Floyd Mayweather is a completely different beast. He's a completely different monster.
Until they get hit. That's most likely the odd reason. Because I recall in the first round, Deontay Wilder was fighting emotional. However, he stick to the script. He stick to the game plan, which is chop the tree down and the head will follow. Now, even though Deontay Wilder did not display or implement any of the combinations he was working on the drills with Malik Scott, truth be told, he could have possibly pulled the fight just by...
He tried this. He tried to get right hands to the body, but this is why I said that this probably would not work. Or, Tyson Fury is just not going to stand there. He's not going to be someone like an Anthony Joshua with his feet planted in the ground. And even Anthony Joshua, if Wilder is going to face him, Anthony Joshua can be a very mighty test for him, as long as Anthony Joshua, doesn't get hit early. But when it comes down to the overall bottom line is this: Tyson Fury is a dude that was going to tie up Deontay Wilder. He was going to try to wear you down with his weight. And on top of that, he was really going to roughhouse you on the inside. And once that happened, Deontay Wilder, don't get me wrong, he was still trying to throw shots on the inside. But he just got all flabbergasted. And that really shows me that he did not really know who the hell he was facing all in all, because Wilder after the fight said, yeah, he tried to wear me down and do this and do that, But Deontay Wilder, he's so dumb that he said, yeah, well, I can bench 350 pounds and, all in all, so he's not going to be able to wear me down. I can just push him right off. That's great that you have that bench press, but a bench press in boxing, that isn't everything. And you have to have very, very good legs in boxing especially. You have to have all around very good strength. And plus on top of that, I don't think gaining that 10 pounds of extra muscle was a great thing, because Wilder has never had great stamina. But it is what it is.
Consistently going to the body, like he did in the first round, and every now and then go to the head. However, I noticed as soon as Tyson Fury hit Deontay Wilder with a crispy right hand at the end of the first round, Deontay Wilder completely abandoned his game plan right after that. In fact, I was looking forward to see how Deontay...
Well, that's funny. Why would Deontay Wilder abandon his game plan, or why overall would he start backing up when Tyson Fury hit him with the right hand? Because as we all know, according to your knowledge, AKHi TV, and we all know that you're this boxing genius, we all know overall that Tyson Fury apparently can't punch. According to Deontay Wilder and his fan base, he can't punch. So why was he backing up?
Wilder was going to react to getting hit, especially after the brutal damage he took by Tyson Fury in the rematch. So when Wilder first took a flush punch by Tyson Fury in the first round, he didn't react well to the punch. It looked like it really shook him up. It's like that Roy Jones effect. Once RJ got KO'd, he was on a roll after that. Some fighters are not the same after they suffer a knockout or a loss.
People overall, they're trying to compare Deontay Wilder to Roy Jones, and they're saying, oh, after that second fight, he was never the same, and that's why he didn't look so good in this fight. And of course, they're still going to allege that Tyson Fury cheated in this second fight. That's not going to go away. Do you think that these people who stood on that hill for so long are just going to admit that, all in all, oh, no, you're right, he didn't cheat in the second fight? Do you think that's going to happen? Because basically, if they said that, they would have to admit that I'm not that smart of a person, or I was always full of shit from the beginning. So they're not going to admit that. All they're going to say, at least for a certain amount of people, they're just going to say all in all that Deontay Wilder was never the same after that second match. And I agree, he probably never was mentally the same after that second match. But when it comes down to the overall, like I said, Deontay Wilder, he's never going to be able to outbox someone like a Tyson Fury. I'm not even quite sure if he can defeat Anthony Joshua or some of these other top contenders. I would bet on him to possibly win some of those fights, but I need to see him in those fights.
And that was the case for Deontay Wilder. He kind of looked punched.
Because once again, excuse me, there was a lot of people that also favored Mike Tyson over Evander Holyfield as well. Evander Holyfield got knocked out by Riddick Bowe, and they thought he was done, and Mike Tyson, they thought that he just had too much power and too much skill, and then look what happened. Evander pretty much whooped his ass in both fights.
Drunk to me. Once he got hit, he completely went away from the game plan. After the first round, he was off balance, had no energy or endurance. Wilder was...
These guys, when they don't really know what the hell they're talking about, they say Wilder after the first round was off balance. Wilder is always off balance, and he's especially off balance when he is put on the back foot. That's how you really test the fighter's feet. When they're on the back foot and they look as clunky as Deontay Wilder's, Deontay Wilder has very horrible footwork. He's always had very, very bad feet, very flat-footed, very clunky, does not know how to move around the ring very well. That's why he gets hit so easily.
Off balance when he threw punches and was crossing his feet before he even got dropped in the third round. Then in the fourth round, Deontay Wilder scored a knockdown by setting up the right hand. He actually did what he was supposed to do.
Well, he did what he was supposed to do, but Wilder saw an opportunity, and Fury, he just did something overall very stupid. Like I said, he went in there very, very straightforward. He went in there overall pretty much asking and begging to be hit by a right hand. Fury overall did not play that the smartest.
Call correctly.
That's why I say this was not even a Fury overall that was at 100%. This Fury was like at about 60%. Because his conditioning overall did not look the same, and he was not even fighting the smartest fight that he possibly could.
He threw two hooks, pivot, went to the body with a jab, then set up the right hand upstairs behind the jab. That's how he managed to drop Tyson Fury. Beside that sequence, Wilder was telegraphing the right hand all night. It was sloppy and slow at the same time. But again, everybody got a game plan till they get hit. And the best chin in boxing is the chin that doesn't get hit. Furthermore, Deontay Wilder could have taken advantage of how much Tyson Fury respected him inside of that ring. If you notice in the first round, Tyson Fury came to the inside to initiate a clinch without even working, without throwing a single punch, which is something he had never done before in the previous fights. The reason why he was expecting Deontay Wilder to have an answer to all of the mauling tactics. But after a few rounds of Tyson Fury putting his weight on Deontay
Wilder cannot fight on the inside very well. In fact, once again, Deontay Wilder, he'll go down as a Hall of Famer in my opinion. Maybe, depending on if he can win some of these other big matchups as well. Apparently, he says he's going to have a big comeback in the spring. We'll see about that because he got his ass whooped so bad. But on top of that, when it comes down to it, he's not going to be facing one of these elite contenders. What, do we really think that Wilder's going to be going in the ring with a Joseph Parker or an Andy Ruiz or something like that? Wilder's going to be facing one of these dudes like a Charles Martin or something like that. He's probably going to get a quick KO, maybe have a little bit of problems, and then overall, we'll see what he fights next.
He figured out Deontay Wilder didn't have an answer to all of the inside work.
Well, not only that he didn't have an answer to all the inside work, he didn't have an answer to that lead jab, which is exactly what I brought up. Because he could not out-jab Tyson Fury. I reviewed a Dante's Boxing Nation video yesterday where Dante, he said, well, why did Deontay Wilder, why overall did he not jab? Overall, you need to have that jab like Larry Holmes. That's great, man, but Wilder does not have that capability. Like Wilder, I'm sorry, but he's never had a great jab. Every time that Wilder looked like he had a good jab, it was always against very short fighters compared to him, or it was against fighters that were very, very slow and really could not do anything against him. It was either usually against a Chris Arreola or a Bermain Stavern. Because every other time that a fighter had reach over him or could compete with him in terms of reach or in terms of height, like a Darrell Washington or a Luis Ortiz or a Tyson Fury, he never looked that good in the jab department because all in all, he doesn't really have a good jab. Your jab is only as good as it is against elite opponents.
That's when it got worse for Wilder because Tyson Fury went from leaning on him to Andre warding him to the body and the head, which eventually broke Deontay Wilder down. That's when Tyson Fury got him out of there. So credit to Tyson Fury. He was surgical with his performance. With that being said, leading up to the Wilder trilogy, Malik Scott said Mike Tyson quote was not true. Even after a fighter get hit, they still can carry on with their game plan. He also said Mike Tyson was talking.
They can if they're smart enough. They can if they're intelligent enough. But you have to be a very, very special type of person, and you have to be a very special type of boxer to get hit to that degree, or to have something that is completely unexpected, and then you adjust to it. But Wilder ain't that guy. Fury is a guy that can adjust very, very well. Terrence Crawford is a person that can adjust very well. Floyd Mayweather, take a look at his fight against Miguel Cotto or Shane Mosley, even against Manny Pacquiao. He got hurt in all those fights, but he was able to adjust and clearly get the victory. He nearly got knocked the hell out in the first couple rounds against Shane Mosley. But guess what? Floyd was able to come back and pretty much win the rest of the fight. I don't remember one round that Shane Mosley would have won after the first 2 rounds.
About himself.
And Mike Tyson, when it comes down to it, no offense against him, but Mike Tyson also was another dude that could not adjust very well. That's why he got his ass kicked so bad against Evander Holyfield.
When he made that quote, which I completely disagree with that part.
A listener note. This episode contains adult content and language. This may not be suitable for all listeners.
Everyone got a plan until they get punched in the face. Daddy. Everyone got a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's just always something, that's always been, in my opinion, that's one of them quotes people run with, only because Mike Tyson said it. They even put Mike Tyson's name in the quote. They don't even separate Mike Tyson from the quote. If you hear anyone say it, they say, just like Mike Tyson say, when you listen, like, it's not about the quote. It's about who is saying it, and that makes it validated. I don't work like that. I work like if something have to make sense for me to believe it, have to make sense for me to apply it to my lifestyle.
Well, that's fair, but, I do think that it makes sense. Basically what Mike Tyson says is that, everyone may have a certain plan until you get punched in the mouth. And basically what that means is that, are you a dude that is going to adjust, or are you a dude overall that when the lights fall upon you, are you going to crumble under the pressure? And Deontay Wilder, I'm sorry, I'm not going to necessarily say that he crumbles under the pressure, but he's just not a dude that can make adjustments. So, yes, there are certain fighters out there that when they get punched in the mouth or when they get hit in the face immediately, they're like, oh shit, this is a completely different game. And you can see certain fighters overall that, it is what it is. Like even Terrence Crawford in that Aegis Velasquez fight. Everyone has a plan until they get hit, overall with the right punch, and then they're like, damn. Now, of course, Terrence Crawford, he was able to come back, but there's certain fighters that all in all, they look very good, but then all of a sudden they start getting hit with that power, and all of a sudden their game plan goes out the window because they can't handle it. But what Mike Tyson maybe didn't understand is that the best of fighters, all in all, they can adjust to that.
No, it sounds good, and it's very fitting because Mike Tyson said it, but I believe that's one of those things that Mike Tyson expressed, but he meant it for himself because, in my opinion, anytime someone...
I agree with that.
Fought really hard at Mike Tyson.
But in a way, it's kind of ironic because Deontay Wilder always used to kind of use the same philosophy. He always used to say overall that, you have to be perfect for a whole 12 rounds, while I only have to be perfect for 2 seconds. That's what Deontay Wilder overall said. So in a way, Deontay Wilder, he actually used a very similar philosophy.
Gave him the same energy that he was giving them and punching him in the face. It always was it was like kind of downhill from there for Mike. And
but that's why overall Mike Tyson and Deontay Wilder, that's why their careers have ended up very, very similar. Where every time they fought the very, very skilled boxer, they did not win that fight. Because after that plan A, or after they saw that their opponent could adjust to their power and overall to their fear-mongering, they're like, oh shit, what do I do now?
So like and then, to his credit, Tony Harrison, my little bro, he called me and he was like, Malik, explain it. I think you went too far into it. And I said, bro, in the history of the sport, Deontay Wilder had a plan against Ortiz, the first fight, to knock him out. Deontay Wilder got punched in the face and continued on with his plan. That plan didn't change. You get what I'm saying? So now I'm going to hop out of, we'll say I'm going to hop out of Deontay, get off the Deontay side because I waved that flag so hard, right? So we'll go to Fury side. I'm putting myself on Fury side. Deontay gave Fury a concussion and knocked him down twice. Fury plan didn't change. He continued to do what he do and push forward like real fighters do.
That's true, but that's only when fighters are allowed to do that, or when fighters are great enough overall to do that. And Deontay Wilder, he's actually a lot like Mike Tyson. He's nowhere near as skilled as a prime Mike Tyson was, but both Mike Tyson and Deontay Wilder, they had a very, very one type of game plan way of fighting. And that's why they said similar type of quotes. That's why when you hear Mike Tyson quotes, he always said some stuff like everyone has a plan until they get hit in the face. Now, Mike Tyson, in my opinion, was a bit smarter than Deontay Wilder, but overall with his style, even though he was very, very skilled, he only usually had one way of fighting, trying to bully around people. And he was a very talented fighter, but, when certain fighters, all in all, when, I guess a quote overall that people should say is that, if you have nothing more than a plan A, then a plan B overall is going to make a coward out of you. Because when it comes down to it, that's exactly what happens almost every single time. If you don't have a plan B or a plan C or a multitude of ways of fighting, and if you're fighting a multi-dimensional fighter, the chances of you losing that fight are much greater.
That face adversity and look at it in the face.
And no offense against Deontay Wilder, but for the first time in his career against Tyson Fury, he fought a dude that could fight in a multitude of ways.
History goes on. Buster Douglas got knocked down and punched in the face by Mike Tyson. He continued to keep the same plan. Holyfield got punched in the face by Mike Tyson. He continued to keep the same plan. It's tons of examples on why that quote doesn't make sense, and I don't care if Mike Tyson said it.
Well, it makes sense when it comes down to it, but it only fits certain fighters. Like Adrian Broner, like that quote would fit for Adrian Broner very, very perfectly. Because when he went in there against Marcos Maidana, or when he goes in there against some of these A-class fighters, people always think that Adrian Broner, that he's super duper skilled and all this sort of bullshit, but they don't really see for what he is. He's a decent fighter. He's got great physical talent, but he's pretty much the Zab Judah, pretty much a lesser version, of Zab Judah, in my opinion. Now, whether you think Adrian Broner would beat Zab Judah in his prime or vice versa, that's up to you. In my opinion, Zab Judah actually was a little bit more talented than Adrian Broner. But that quote would fit Adrian Broner very, very good, because once Adrian Broner gets hit in the mouth, or once he starts to get hit, and once his opponent starts to put pressure on him, he has no idea what to do whatsoever.
Because Mike Tyson have also said Tyson Fury has Deontay Wilder's number, the same way Holyfield had his number. Something else that is totally not true. When Mike fought Holyfield, Mike never was in the fight. It never was competitive. It should have never really been no rematch. It should never have been considered to be a trilogy, because he was so outclassed and outnumbered and outmanned by Holyfield that he never was just in the fight.
I agree with that.
Wilder and Fury, these guys have been going back and forth from 2 fights. It's a deserving trilogy.
It's very unfortunate that Mike Tyson did not finish that rematch of the Vander Holyfield. It looked like he was kind of coming into his own. I just watched that fight yesterday, actually. It looked like he was coming into his own a little bit in that third round against Holyfield, but he did not want to face Holyfield throughout that whole entire fight, because he was very clearly looking for a way out. Because why would you be coming back all of a sudden and then you bite his ear? And I understand Holyfield, he's not, Tyson's not the only person to say that Holyfield was a big headbutter. He's not the only person to say that. Lennox Lewis also said that he was on record as stating that Holyfield used his head like a battering ram. So he's not the only one to state that. But come on, man, you can't bite a dude's ear off. Like, you got to find some other way. You gotta, maybe just throw on the belt line or something like that, or overall, find some other way, to fight back. You got to try to, overall find a way around that, adjust. But that's the problem with Mike Tyson, man. He doesn't know how to adjust.
Fury doesn't have his number, especially knowing Deontay wasn't at his best under so many different circumstances in the second fight and the controversy that came.
He was, but it is what it is.
With it. And
that's why this third fight looks so similar. That's why you hear so many of these guys, they tried to say, oh, well, the third fight wasn't anything like the second fight. It was almost exactly like the second fight. The only rounds that were different were rounds 1 and rounds 4. Because Deontay Wilder tried to change his game plan a little bit up. And obviously this was not a Tyson Fury at 100%. But when it comes down to the overall bottom line is this fight looked almost exactly like the second fight. Because a lot of Deontay Wilder fans, they have the same complaints. They say all in all, oh, Deontay Wilder, he looked completely gassed. He looked completely out on his feet and all sort of bullshit. Because he does not have great feet. He never has.
In the first fight, when he knocked Fury out and Fury came back, this is not Holyfield and Tyson. If Holyfield and Tyson fought 10 times, Holyfield would beat Mike 10 times. Because he just can't beat him. He can't even knock him.
I would agree, but it's the same thing there. And I understand that this was said before the fight, so it is what it is. But even now, of course, if you're in Deontay Wilder's corner, I don't know if you're going to say that Fury beats him 10 times or anything like that. But if we're just being realistic, if Fury and Wilder were to face each other 10 times, Wilder maybe could pull out 1 or 2 against Fury if he landed something really, really swift on Fury, and all in all, he just was able to put him to sleep. But the more likely chance is that Fury would probably beat him all 10 times.
Yeah. Look at Holyfield's face. You take that ear, by the way, right? Look at Holyfield's face when he fought Mike. There's no bruises. It looked like he just came out of a walk out the park. Look at Fury's face after he...
Well, you can't always go by that when it comes down to, certain people overall, they always love to say, well, take a look at this guy's face and all sort of stuff. Well, you can't go by that. That's why you have to take a look at the whole entire fight. That's why I say, even if you go by punch stats or if you overall, go by someone's face and how they look, you can't go by that. You have to watch the whole entire fight yourself.
Out of the ring with Deontay Wilder the first fight. Put up a good fight, but it looked like he was in the actual fight is what I'm trying to say.
He also said Mike Tyson was talking about himself when he made that quote, which I completely disagree with that part. Because if we're talking about the
I don't disagree with him. I think that Malik Scott is somewhat onto something. But what I will say is that it doesn't just apply to Mike Tyson. It can apply to other fighters. And what that tells me overall is that Mike Tyson, that he was used to facing fighters that did not know how to get past him and did not know how to adjust. Because that quote is not feasible for fighters overall that know how to get past a plan A.
Mike Tyson, before he lost to that man in the mirror, where he was undisciplined, so on and so forth, then I totally disagree because that was a totally different beast. See, what Mike Tyson meant is that once a fighter get hit, depending on what they get caught with, it can mess with their equilibrium and lose their concentration, which is a recipe to getting KO'd.
Let you know, it was more than a couple of times. Every time.
It can mean that a little bit. I can see, a part of that. But all in all, like I said, I think what Mike Tyson really means there overall is that everyone has a game plan till they feel my power. Till they feel overall, what type of punches I'm going to unleash on them. Once again, a very similar mindset to Deontay Wilder,
Hitting the right hook, really hurting bad, and it's done, and that's what I'm telling you.
Prince Naseem Hamed, decently skilled fighter, also had a decent amount of holes in his game. Another fighter that relied a lot on his power.
Featherweights with Prince.
That's why as soon as he fought Marco Antonio Barrera, the most skilled fighter he ever fought, he got his ass embarrassed.
You see, when they get hit, it's a whole different story. When they get hit, it breaks the concentration and they get ready to get knocked out. I just hope that they're all safe. That's what
Exactly. Now you see Naseem Hamed overall is saying the same shit here. Now Naseem Hamed, he was known overall for having A-grade power. Like, for those of you that don't know Prince Naseem Hamed overall, he was a dude that could knock you out with either punch. That dude had A-grade power. He might be one of the hardest hitting little men of all time in terms of boxing history. But any person overall that says that and says they can't handle my power, they can't handle my left hand, like you remember Conor McGregor. Now, Conor McGregor was a smarter fighter in my opinion. He was not as one-dimensional in the earlier parts of his career at his peak. But all in all, when someone says overall they just can't handle my power, they can't handle this, usually what that means is that they're not usually going to have a plan B. And Prince Naseem Hamed, when he finally fought that fighter that could adjust, and when he finally fought that fighter that could adapt to his surroundings, he got his ass kicked. He got outclassed.
With the facts being laid out, drop your thoughts in the comment section below, subscribe below, and click on the notification bell to be continued on the next episode of AKHi TV. Peace, and I'm on to the next one.
But anyways, that's really about it for this video. I just thought that was a very interesting conversation. Because Mike Tyson, when he says that, I do believe all in all that he was talking about himself. And Malik Scott overall, he says that quote doesn't really make sense. No, I think it makes sense because I think there's certain people overall that they have a game plan and they go in there and they get hit with that punch and they say, wow, this dude is so goddamn powerful, and they get flustered and then they get a little bit afraid and they say, I just can't handle this dude's power. And if I don't try to go in survival mode, I'm going to get stopped by this guy. I think that's what happens against certain people, or even against Manny Pacquiao. Certain people, they go in there with the game plan, but then they get hit by that left hand or they get hit by a good punch and they say, God damn, this dude is so powerful overall and so fast. I cannot even see where the hell this guy is hitting me from. And I think all in all, that's kind of where it comes from. But once again, when it comes to the greatest of fighters, power is not just what they rely on, And Naseem Hamed, he was a person overall that, he had somewhat of a skill set a little bit. He also had a certain amount of holes in his game. But Naseem Hamed, what you would notice is that in the biggest matchups of his career, he would get knocked down a couple times. Like if you remember that matchup against Kevin Kelly, because he would never cover his chin when it came down to it and never keep his hands up, he got knocked down about 2 or 3 times in that fight. But what bailed him out? It was his power. But as soon as his power could not bail him out, he got his ass kicked against Marco Antonio Barrera. So, Mike Tyson, Prince Naseem Hamed, and Deontay Wilder, all these fighters, they have a very, very similar mindset. So it is what it is. And that's a big part of the reason why they always ended up with disappointing careers. But it is what it is. Anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to y'all later.